Today is February 26th, 2023. How the time flies. And today's topic is something I want to talk about because I don't talk about it all the time, but I do know a lot about it. It's the church in communist Hong Kong today. Because as a pastor, of course, I'm concerned and I know about it. I attended church there for many, many decades. I have a lot of friends there that are pastors and going to church. And I thought it would be appropriate for the world to kind of understand that a little bit better. And, I talk a lot about communism is evil. And now communism or communist China controls communist Hong Kong. So I felt it was important to discuss it a little bit for the world to know more. Communist China has policies that make it difficult to be a Christian. They also pay close attention to what Christians are doing, and they try to stop it if it exceeds what they say they would allow. Uh, they're kind of taking the last step of the churches in Hong Kong because they've done it before in China, in mainland China, but they're taking it step by step for communist Hong Kong. They're arresting leaders, people who protest or speak out against communism or communist China. Uh, they're beating people, they're putting them in prison, they're stopping all kinds of activities. They have done it a little bit in the church in communist Hong Kong, but they haven't totally came in and interfered in the church. They're using that, I think, as a later step. That's my opinion. I arrived in communist Hong Kong. It was then England, Hong Kong. Really, there's not a whole lot of difference if you know a lot about what they put the importance in. It's that the government rules over the people, not the people rule over the government. But there's some open debate on that, you could say. But I arrived in 1986. I was working with the churches in then England, Hong Kong. Pretty much a free place, but under English rulership, which is really what it was. It's ruling over the people of Hong Kong. They would give churches who had a close relationship with England. It's like the Anglican Church, special favors. In fact, the only piece of land that is privately owned in Hong Kong, both under Britain and under communist China, and there's some debate now about communist China, but the only piece of land is the Anglican Church, which is in Central District. It's a very small piece of land that a church sits on, and I believe it was the first church in Hong Kong to be established. It's really a state church from England. So the rest of the land is actually owned by the government, and people lease the land for a period of time. So that says a lot about how the church is viewed, and under both England and communist China. So the church who would agree with the dictates that the England government would pass on to people, such as the government controls the people, not the other way around, and that royalty was the highest level, even above the government, that would be looked at favorably, and then the church would receive all kinds of favors and all kinds of like land or approvals to becoming to use the government land or building at a very low or very reduced cost, even for $1 a year. And that's if they agreed. But if they didn't agree, there were all kinds of obstacles to overcome. They wouldn't be able to get the land very easily, or they'd have to pay a high price. And so that was really persecution, I could say, because there are a lot of churches that don't want to agree with the royalty or the England government, and also now that's kind of transferred over into the communist China. There are a lot of churches. In fact, I can say there are just a handful of churches that will speak out against communist China or communism or the communist government of Hong Kong, because now they will actually put the people who do that, including the pastors and the church workers, in prison. And they will have a kangaroo trial to show that there is some kind of justice taking place there, which people who understand the system understand it's not really justice. And they will put them in the prison. So there are cases where a pastor in Shengshui, his church was closed down because he was letting people who were speaking out against the government come into his church and have water, sleep, and food during that period when people were taking to the streets. And he didn't really say whether he supported that or not that I know of, but he would open the church doors. And of course, I would assume he would let anyone come in the church, to have rest, but I'm not really sure on that. So he actually was, they arrested some of his staff. I believe the pastor was able to, just before then, go to another country, maybe England, and he wasn't arrested. So he's been gone. And they closed the doors of that church, and it remains closed to this day. So that shows persecution. Then there were other cases where a lot of the people who were taking to the streets, which was international news, speaking out against communist China, were arrested and put in the prison and remain in the prison in this day. So that is severe persecution. People like Benny Tai, very committed Christian. I know him well. We spent time praying together, and many others. So those people were put in the prison. So I want people to be aware that the church in communist Hong Kong, if you don't speak out, if you keep your mouth shut, you don't speak in when you're doing the pastor a sermon, or you don't go in the newspaper and speak out what you feel about communism. Now, of course, there are people who also agree. There are churches who agree with communism, and you could just say they're false churches. There are many churches like that in China, in mainland China. They're state-run churches, government-run churches, and everybody has to agree with the communist government. But so there is no real freedom of thought there or freedom of speech. So those churches which exist in communist Hong Kong, they keep their mouth shut, and they do whatever the government tells them. And then there are churches that say they're churches, Christian churches. They also keep their mouth shut. Are they Christian churches? Well, let's put it this way. I wouldn't go to one, okay? But it's almost impossible now to find a church in communist Hong Kong that speaks out, because they're in fear, and they don't really believe in the scriptures well enough to believe that God is going to protect them, or that they're going to have an influence on the circumstance. So during the protest period, I actually I want to tell the protest, I wouldn't even use the word protest. I would use the word revolution, because the people were taking to the streets. There were a group of people, it was a large number of people, to try to overthrow the government and to try to have a new form of government. There were about 5 churches that came together, and they were where the people were. They were ministering to them. They were praying for them. And there were pastors there, and there were church workers. I could almost say all of them. I think I knew all of them. And we would get together and pray together. We knew each other. But then there also was another person I was very close to, who would organize people to walk on the sidewalks and sing hymns and do prayer. He was arrested, and he was put in prison for a few years. I think he's out on bail now. But bail is kind of a way of being arrested where you can't speak out your mind, because they say if you take to social media, like anybody who would do a video like this would be arrested immediately. So I want people to know what is happening in communist Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong, many people think Hong Kong is there's a majority of Christians there. And I lived there for close to 30 years. And it depends on how you define a Christian. Uh, Statistically, it will be put out that there's 15% Christians in Hong Kong. I would just say that just because someone attends a church is not a Christian doesn't mean they're a Christian. Or sometimes they'll attend a church and then they won't be there for years and years, and they'll count them as a Christian. My belief is people who are born again Christians, okay, spirit-led Christians who believe in Jesus Christ, and believe in miracles and believe in that Jesus will watch over them, that kind of a Christian. You just say spirit-led Christian or born-again Christian. I would say there's less than 1%. So Hong Kong, communist Hong Kong, is not a place where there's a lot of Christians. That's how I would tell you. Does that mean that we shouldn't do something to reach out to them? Yes, absolutely. I do my best. I promote, I put up videos where in the language of communist Hong Kong, it's called Cantonese and English. And I try my best to reach people who remain in communist Hong Kong. So I'm trying my best to reach out to them. I speak out, I speak out against communism. I say each time communism is evil, which they are not hearing in their churches. I doubt if there's one church in communist Hong Kong that says that, simply because immediately the pastor would be arrested, or maybe they don't even believe it. So pray for the people in communist Hong Kong, pray for the believers, but pray that from this situation, more people will come to know Jesus Christ, the love of Jesus Christ, and, stand up and speak out, and don't be afraid to protect themselves, their family, and their freedom of thought and their freedom of speech. And I would just like to say thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful to you to understand the circumstance there. I loved it there. I was very involved. I worked with the local people who were living there, and not the tourists, not the foreigners who were coming there and working for a few years and then going back to wherever they came from, or even the foreigners who were living there for a long time. I worked really with the people who were born there and the Chinese people, the Hong Kong people. So please do pray for them. And my heart is still there. I still do everything I can to help them. I've just put myself in a safer position now so that I can speak out, because what good would my knowledge be if I couldn't say anything to the world or to people in Hong Kong, which is how it is set up now. So I just want you to ask for you to pray for the people. Thank you for watching, and we'll have a good day. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.